born in Norwalk, Connecticut, on February 19th, 1924. My mother and father were divorced. He was a World War I vet, and he had been gassed. He was with the 11th Engineers, came back, and it was just impossible. So she finally divorced him, and then we moved to New York City.
Okay.
66 West 53rd Street. I still remember the address. Yeah. It's in Manhattan, and it's, well, 3 blocks from Radio City on 6th Avenue. I went to elementary school on 125 West 54th Street. It was PS 69. In 1938, she rented a house out in Queens County. It was called Hollis, Long Island. And I graduated in 39 and then went to high school in Queens. When I was 15, I had one goal in life, and that was to get on the New York State Police.
Okay.
And I had read everything you could imagine about the New York State Police. Spoke to this lieutenant in the New York State Police. We got to be real friendly, even though I was there, well, until I was 18. And I asked him, I said, hey, Lieutenant, what would be the best road to go to get on the state police? He said, join the Marines. And it was World War II then. And he said that'd be an excellent training program for the state police. So I came home and told my mother, and because my father had been in Europe during all the invasions there, she said, no way, you're not going in the Marines. So every night I would plot an argument. I would just wait until I could start another argument, and hoping that she would say, well, all right, go join the Marines. And she didn't relent. Okay. Finally, she said, well, if you join the Navy, I'll consent to that. So I ended up joining the Navy. Well, I joined in it was December of 42. I left for Sampson Naval Training Station, Lake Seneca. And it was dead winter. I mean, that's the first time it was so cold that winter of 43, they said it went down to 42 below one night.
Wow.
So, I mean, it was bitter, bitter cold, you know. They said, we're going to send you to a quartermaster school in Newport, Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. So I finished that and then was transferred in August to the USS Housatonic. In World War II, the United States Navy trained us until, you know. I went aboard the Housatonic, which was a Navy tanker, and that my mother really shuddered when she found out I was on a Navy tanker, because the German subs, that's what they wanted, was tankers. You know, if they could cut the fuel supply down to 0, they knew they would win the war, you know. Mm-hmm. The radar picked up a blip, and we went to investigate it, and it was about a 60-foot lifeboat. And this really impressed me as a young kid. Mm-hmm. There was a Bible opened up and all personal belongings on this lifeboat, but no bodies, you know. Obviously it had been people in it. So they put the order out, load the gun and blow it to pieces. So I was a loader, and the trainer and the gun captain wound the gun around and blew it out of the water, you know. And that really did impress me. I said, see, you know, there's a time when, hey, you could leave this earth, you know. He said, you're going to one of 3 islands. I said, what? He said, yeah, you're going to Iwo Jima, Chi-Chi-Jima, or Ha-Ha-Jima. And that means Baby Island, Mama Island, and Papa Island. I said, wow. You know, this is like, you know, something in the Bible coming true, you know. And the Japs started shooting mortar down. And my first impression when I was in the gun tub was flying fish. You know, it was, and then it dawned on me, that ain't flying fish. We watched both flags go up, the first one, and then the second one. Every ship in the harbor blew its whistle when the flag went up, you know.
If you looked across the water by Iwo Jima, could you even count the number of ships? Or
Oh, I mean, it was just massive.
okay.
I mean, I wouldn't, if you told me 600, I'd believe. And then, like I say, then at night, as soon as 7:30 came, you were aware that the Japs were going to send air raids over. So at night, you had to be on the gun, and it was air raids, you know. Then we went up into the northern part of the Philippines, and we were practicing for the invasion of Japan. And I can remember I was in the boat, and we pulled up alongside of an LCI, and this guy hollered down. So the guy says, "Hey, did you guys hear the war is over?" And one of the guys had a rifle. He said, "You better shut your,"
Yeah.
he used Navy terms. "You better shut your mouth, or, you know, or else." So come to find out, the guy was right. That was when they were talking about September 2nd. And September 1st, the day before the signing of the armistice, we went into Yokohama with this army unit. And then on September 2nd, we went out into the bay or Tokyo Harbor, and with glasses we could see the signing on the big Mo on the battleship.
Okay.
To go into the Columbia River, when the tide changes, it's a awful approach, because all the water in the Columbia River is trying to get into the ocean, and the ocean is pushing back. I was standing on the bridge when I saw them run up a red flag, we used to call it a Baker flag. And what it meant was, I'm out of control. So I quick turned to the officer of the deck and said, "The ship in front is out of control." So we had enough warning to go around them. We went down and we tied up in Pier 96, and then about 3 or 4 hours later, here 2 tugboats bring this ship down and tie next to us. Well, I was up on deck and I said to the guy, "Hey, any guys from New York?" He said, "No, but there's one guy from Connecticut." "What's his name?" "Sturm." It was my cousin.
Okay.
Yeah. So Sonny Sturm came down and we greeted each other and that, and he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I rate 1 month's leave, and I'm going to take the train and go back to New York, you know." Well, he says, "I'm going to hitchhike back. Why don't you come with me and we'll hitchhike back. We'll save the $70 train fare." I said, "No, Sonny, I don't want to hitchhike back, you know." So when I got back, I heard, they said, "Hey, did you hear about the guy on the Mount Baker? He was hitchhiking back to New York, and he got picked up, and the car had a head-on collision. He got killed."
Oh.
So, I mean, that was a shocker, you know. I found you just don't go back into civilian life like opening a door and going in, you know. It's got to be a gradual thing. So a buddy of mine that I had gone to high school with, he said, "Hey, Ruth Wanch called and wants you and me to go to a party over at her house. And she's already picked a girl for you, and I'm gonna go with her. You want?" "No, I don't want to go to any party. No. So he kept bugging me. I said, "Okay, all right, I'll go." So we went over there, and that's when I met my wife, you know.
Okay. So was it an arranged first date? Was it the person you were supposed to go with?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, and that was it. I met this woman up on the main drag, this Mrs. Hannon, and I had been a friend of her son, Donald Hannon, and I had heard he was killed in World War II. So I met her and I said, "How you doing, Mrs. Hannon?" "Oh," she says, "I'm not doing too bad." She says, "But Pop Hannon is really," he was a CPA, and he had a business in 60 Wall Street. It was called Hannon and Lynch, CPAs. So as time went on, we got more and more friendly, you know. He said, "Tom, if you go to college and take accounting, major in accounting, and become a CPA, I'll give you half of my business on Wall Street."
Okay.
So I went to Adelphi College and I majored in accounting and minored in business. And I was probably 2 years into it. And at night, I'd be up all night long doing problems, you know. I said, what am I doing? And I hate this stuff, you know. So I quit. And then I went to electronics school. And then went to work for the telephone company. And that's how I got into communications, you know. No, when I went to work for the phone company, I had to start like the beginning of January. And I said, well, I'm going to get married in February. And they said, well, that's all right. So February 19th, I was married.
Okay.
So,
Another February 19th.
Yeah, right. My wife hated upstate New York. I mean, it was, the year we left, they had 176 inches of snow. I picked up the Syracuse paper, and I happened to open up to the want ads, the personnel want ads, and here's a picture of a palm tree and the sun behind it. And it said, how would you like to work in sunny Florida? I said, holy catfish, that sounds pretty good. So I called the guy up, and it was RCA. They were looking for troops. I got transferred over to Merritt Island. It was called MILA, Merritt Island Launch Area. And after Kennedy was murdered, they changed it to Kennedy Space Center. And that's where I retired from. My title when I retired was Senior Communications Engineer. We took care of all video, data, and audio, strictly ground communications to the bird. They had an umbilical and the cable was plugged into the side of the bird. And all the data on that would come back to the computer. And it was our responsibility until they had first motion. First motion, the bird would kick the umbilical out, and as soon as that cable came out, it went to an RF unit that took over, and our responsibility ceased, you know. The next real thing was the Challenger. I hadn't worked a shot in probably 2 years, and we started in on a Friday, and it was in January, and it was bitter cold. And so then we came in Sunday night, and they said, hey, I was listening to the net from Washington, and the guy from Washington was telling the test conductor, you better get this SB in the air, because Reagan is going to make his speech on Tuesday, and he wants to include this in the speech. So they got all panicky, and I can remember looking at all of our equipment, and icicles and we should not have gone. But they started counting, and then about, as I remember now, I think maybe about 11 o'clock in the morning, they gave the word to go. And I had a white shirt on. We had to wear a tie and a shirt. So I left the console, and I went out the side door to look at it, and it was cold. And I said, well, it's too cold. I'm going to go back in and look at it on a monitor. So I turned and went to walk up the steps, and I turned around, and that's when it blew. And that was a shock of all shocks, you know. Well, there are certain memories that I've kind of held to myself, and I hesitate to say it because, but I came down off the gun, and I said I didn't want to go down to the mess hall. I just went down and got a cup of coffee, and I wanted to go up on deck and just sit by myself because we had been there all night long. This was at Ewell, and I'm drinking my coffee by myself. I look down, and here's a Marine floating in the water, and there was maybe 100 fish around. He was blown in half, and the fish were eating his innards. So this chief I know, he was up on the flying bridge, and I said, hey, Chief, come on down. I got a guy floating in the water. So he came down, And he said, "Oh my God, that's a black mullet." I just remember him saying that, you know. So he said, "Go get a boat rod, boat hook, and go down the net." So I climbed down the net and I managed to get this Marine. He had a shovel and his backpack on, helmet on, and I pulled him over and they threw down a very small net and I got it around him and they pulled him up. Mm-hmm. But I can still see that guy's face, you know. Yeah, many a night I still see his face, you know. And if you want to ask me what the most emotional thing I've ever had in my life, it was Hiroshima. Mm-hmm. We went up, I said, "Now, don't eat anything, don't drink anything, and by all means, don't cut yourself." And this was like maybe 6 weeks after they had dropped the bomb, mm-hmm. 7 weeks after. And I got up there, and when I got out of the boat, I said, "I don't believe this. You know, that one bomb could do this." And I can remember going across that one bridge where the guy's shadow was burnt into the concrete. He was on ground zero when the bomb exploded. We went down into the air raid shelters and they were loaded with bodies. They hadn't even gotten that far. They were cremating them in the field. They had 2 or 3 units were just cremating bodies. Mm-hmm. It kept the Germans off the streets of New York and the Japs off the streets of San Francisco. Mm-hmm. It was about as simple as that. You don't realize how close we came. You know, if it had been a combined Jap-German effort, I think we would have lost it, you know. Mm-hmm. At no time did I feel that I was just wasting my time, and I felt that, hey, we're doing something to save the country, you know. Mm-hmm.